In this video, we'll be adding enemy resistance logic needed for our game. First, let's add the player as a variable to the game manager. This way, our enemy will have access to the location of the player as long as they have access to the game manager. Make sure to add the player game object as a player variable on the game manager. Next, let's open the enemy script and add a public game object for our projectile prefab and a public game manager for our game manager. Next, let's create two functions. A public void function named attack, where we'll spawn in the new projectile, and a public void function named check, where we'll check if the enemy should fire. To check if the enemy should fire, we'll be comparing the X position on both game objects. If the difference in X positions falls between a predetermined range, we'll tell our enemy to shoot the projectile by calling the attack function. In our attack function, let's instantiate a new projectile prefab by using the vector3 down as a parameter of the spawn function in our projectile component. We don't want our enemy to continuously call our check function, so let's avoid placing it in our update function. Instead, let's use the invoke repeating function. Invoke repeating takes a function name and a float that equals a given number of seconds as parameters. It then calls the specified function repeatedly, waiting the given number of seconds between each call. Let's use the random range function to populate a value between 0 and 6 seconds, so that not all our enemies act the exact same. Next, let's test our code. As you can see, the enemies destroy themselves when they attack. To fix this, we'll need to create a new variable on the projectile to distinguish between each of the projectile's target and sender. First, let's add a tag to the player. Return to Unity and select the player game object in the hierarchy. Click the tag dropdown in the inspector and select player. Open the projectile script and add a private string variable to the header of the function. Let's set the value of the target in the spawn function by creating a new string parameter for the function. Then in the collision handler, compare the collision game object's tag to the target variable, killing the object if they are the same. Lastly, let's create a death function for our player. This function will be responsible for destroying the player game object upon getting hit. In the next video, we'll be wrapping up our arcade game by adding menu UI, fonts, and more.